as we're talking about the disruption to supply chains, the escalation of already high food prices, we have two perfect guests to talk about this topic. We're joined now by Rania Al-Mashat, Egypt's Minister of International Cooperation. Thank you for joining us. And Sri Mulyani Indrawati, the Minister of Finance for Indonesia. Thank you for joining us. Welcome to you both. Minister Al-Mashat, I'd like to start with you. Obviously, Egypt has a relationship with Russia. You are a major grain importer. And I wonder if you could walk me through what this moment means for you, both economically and politically.
Well, for every country in the world, there is an impact of what we're seeing economically. So Egypt is no exception in that. And I think the discussion that we heard earlier, whether it's commodity prices, fuel prices, the disruption in trade, all of this has implications on countries that are just moving out of COVID. We were maybe a month ago in a very different discussion, the recovery, the return of tourism, and so forth. Today, the discussion is very different. We had to very quickly think of safety nets. We had to very quickly think of mitigation impact for the public. So the cost of grains, as they were going up, we kept the subsidies and the prices of bread on ration cards the same, but nonetheless there was an increase in the price of bread, which is not on ration cards. So every country is moving to try and mitigate as much as possible the immediate impact. Nonetheless, the realization is this is going to have longer implications, and that's why today, as we are with the spring meetings here at the World Bank and the IMF, trying all together to think of collective action where institutions can actually help countries push forward with the recovery, or actually try and stave off a little bit of the implications. I just want to say that a few facts that people may not know about Egypt. We have diversified the imports of wheat a while back. So this is also, even though we're the biggest importer of wheat, Ukraine and Russia are key markets, but there have also been other markets. Something else which happened a few years ago is investment in silos for storage of wheat. And that's why our strategic stock lasts up until September. And there has been more investment in domestic agriculture of wheat. So these are a few facts that may not have made it to the headlines, but that has also helped us tremendously in this shock, because there was a preemptive action a while back.
That's fascinating. And it's so interesting, as you mentioned, the measures you've taken have kind of been for the immediate fallout. You specifically mentioned that you have these silos of grain that last until September. I wonder, how do you plan for the future in an environment like this? What do you do after September, and what do those conversations look like right now?
I mean, you know, there's it's a question that is on each and every policymaker's mind. And when we talk about food security, where we'll link that to the climate agenda as well, because if we're talking about agriculture, water, the investments in trying to keep the regional supply chains moving, but the diversification to other exporters of wheat. India is today being presented as a market that could, I won't say fully substitute, but at least provide supply for some of the grains that the world needs. So, you know, more incentives for domestic production, and that is an action that has been taken domestically, and also trying to find whether within the region or substitute markets for the imports of wheat and grains.
And Minister Al-Mashat, I actually wonder if I could follow up with you on the climate change issue, because Egypt is hosting COP27 this year. And I wonder, you know, how you see the war in Ukraine changing sort of the pace and the tone around our move away from carbon-based fuel sources, around sort of the dedication to combating climate change.
So as much as it looks challenging, there is an opportunity, because when we look at the fuel and the interruption, the possibility for renewables and the possibility for depending more on green hydrogen, and the possibility of creating transmission lines from in our case, Egypt to Europe and so forth, depending on renewables, this is an opportunity. So despite how murky it looks, there are examples and there are ways to draw private sector investments into countries. But let me focus on the message of COP27. It's from pledges and commitments to implementation. We want it to be an implementation COP. And for that to happen, there needs to be a way for all the private sector commitments that were made in Glasgow to make their ways to countries. And the only way to do that is if more climate finance, ODA, is presented to actually de-risk some of the private sector investments. So despite the conversation today on the immediate impact of the war, the humanitarian effect, and so on. But you know, the climate issue is one which is a common denominator. It will continue to be there. And what we want to emphasize, for example, adaptation was very big in Glasgow. We want to push that further because of the importance of agriculture for food security. This is what we're seeing today. So if we are able to increase investments in, and you know, there's a misconception that private sector does not make money from adaptation. That is not the case. We want to show that no, on the contrary, and this war has shown that. So there is, if you will, several spots that we need to keep on emphasizing and pushing forward. You know, if I look at the G24 communique, which came out a few days ago, despite the fuel, food, fertilizer, and financial shocks, there was a section dedicated on climate, and this is important, and dedicated in these terms of de-risking and trying to draw in the private sector investments that are needed in the countries. So we will continue to push that message forward, and also use life examples of projects and partnerships that worked in countries and see how we can scale those in other places.
Great. Rania Al-Mashat and Shri Indrawati, thank you both so much for joining us today.